Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books. Today I have another wrap up for you of 8 books that I read in recent weeks. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today is going to be a quick little roundup of the 8 books that I read, listened to either on my e-reader, my audiobook app, or as a physical copy. So I read 3 physical copies. I think I did 3 audiobooks and I did 2 ebooks in the past couple weeks. So let me tell you all about it. So here is the first physical copy that I read. This is Our Lady of Mystery Ailments by T.L. Huchu. And I really adored the first book in this series, which is, where is it? It's right here. The Library of the Dead. That was really, really enjoyable. But in this book, I felt that we didn't get the kind of character development that I would have wanted in a second book in a series. I felt that a lot of the things that were already set up in the first book were just repeated, which felt like this was just a book that did the exactly same thing as the first one, and this didn't have the massive like aha, oh that's what's going on sort of moment that the first book had. So overall I enjoyed this less, and I'm sort of doubting whether I want to continue the series. There was also a really big focus on our main character not having a lot of money, and that was something that we were reminded of all the time, and I was like, yes, I understand this is important for our main character, but I also felt that there were plenty of opportunities where she could have gotten help from other people where she wasn't asking for it. So I don't know why, but I just felt that the main character could have been fleshed out a little bit more in like more dimensions than it is now. And it feels sort of YA because of the character's not only age, but also the fact that the character development just isn't as well done. Was it still enjoyable? Was it a quick, fast-paced read? Yes, I do enjoy the characters that are in the novel. You definitely want to root for them and you want them to do well. So the book does that very well. So that's why this wasn't like a super, super low read for me. I think, let me see. Yeah, this was still 3 stars. So to me, 3 stars this is enjoyable. I would definitely recommend it to other people, but I don't think I would reread it again. Yes, it's right there. Then the second physical copy I read was by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. This is Silver Nitrate. And Silver Nitrate is a book that very much suited the gothic-y needs of a reading month like October. Like, I love gothic fiction to begin with, and this definitely had all the elements. I just felt it was incredibly slow-paced to get started. So if you don't know what this book is about, I don't think I gave you a synopsis of the other book, but it's a second book in a series, so I can't really say much about it. Let me redo that. So the first physical copy that I finished this roundup is Our Lady of Mystery Ailments by T.L. Huchu. This is a second book in a series. The first book in the series is The Library of the Dead, and in this series we follow Ropa, who is a teenager who lives in a like dystopian version of Edinburgh. Something has happened, we don't know exactly what, but parts of the city are ransacked and controlled by gangs, and she herself lives in a sort of like slum-like area, and she can talk to ghosts. And that's sort of like the magical element to this book. I really enjoyed the first book in the series. The second one for me was a little bit lacking. I still gave this 3 stars, so still very enjoyable and indeed, and I would still recommend it. But where I had hoped we would take some of the character development from the first book and continued on with it, I just felt that it kind of fell flat. For me, I just wished Ropa was a bit more dimensional. She's complaining a lot about having no money, and then when she has an opportunity to ask for help, she doesn't do it. So for me, that just felt like she was digging her own hole. So on the one hand, I really enjoy Ropa because as a character, she is really snarky and headstrong and like a strong, independent woman for sure, who's like making sure her grandma and her sister can have a good life. But at the same time, when push comes to shove, she doesn't really speak up for herself or stand up for herself. And I was hoping that we would sort of see a development like towards this like more adult version of Ropa, but we don't really get it in this series. and that's why I felt a little bit disappointed with it. There are lots of enjoyable characters in this book, though. You want to root for them. That's one of the best parts about this novel, but I felt overall story-wise, this was just really repetitive compared to the first one. And where the first one had this like aha plot twist at the end, this didn't have it. So for me, it just felt a little bit like a more toned down version of the first one. And I just had wanted more of what the first one had to offer. So that's why this was 3 stars, still enjoyable, really good, but it definitely lagged in certain places, and that's why I only gave it 3 stars. Second book I read in a physical copy was Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia, and I have to look up real quickly what score I gave this, because I never know from the top of my head. This was another 3-star read for me, and this, again, very enjoyable. It's a great gothic-y read for the fall season, and that's why I wanted to read it now and pick it up. I read Mexican Gothic last year and really enjoyed it, and I think over time, Sylvia Moreno-Garcia can definitely become one of my favorite authors. This one was a little bit lacking in places. We follow 2 main characters who have known each other since childhood. One of them is an audio editor, and the other one is let's say an actor past his prime. Something happened to him and his girlfriend, and it's still haunting him to this day. And together they end up meeting a director of a long lost horror movie, and this is very much set in the early 90s. So when a lot of things were still done in a more old-fashioned way, like there's no email, there are no cell phones, that sort of thing. And they are sort of, the sound engineer lady is very much a fan of horror movies. So meeting this director is one of her dreams. And very quickly they are, they find out there's a little bit more to this director and his past than they had anticipated. There's magic involved. There's a sorcerer who wants to come back to the dead, so a bit of necromancy in this as well. And as exciting as that sounds, this wasn't as dark and gloomy as I was expecting it to be. Where in Mexican Gothic, there is this uncertain undertone from the start of the book where you don't know what's going on, but you know something is going on. I felt with this book, there was a lot of time spent on getting to know the characters and their dynamics. This is only a 300-page book, and it took at least 100 pages for this story to get going, and then I still felt that the middle part dragged, and everything happened in the last 100 pages. So for me, where I wanted more character development in the previous book, I could have done with a little bit less, and this could have cut to the action and the suspense a little bit more quickly, because once it got to the more suspenseful part, this was incredibly quick and a very easy to read book indeed, and that's what made it really enjoyable. This book really redeemed itself in the second half of the book, but the first half of the book was just 2 people complaining all the time about having no money and being lonely the entire time, and to me that got old really quickly, and again very repetitive in some of the descriptions as well. So for me, that's what knocked it down a notch, but still enjoyable and a great gothic read, and especially enjoyable if you want to know more about sound editing and horror movies and that sort of thing. I definitely think there's a subplot here that is very enjoyable too. And now I'm busting the cover, but this is one I finished just last night. This is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and so many people on TikTok rate this so highly as a great vampire novel that they have found this year. And 2024 is the year of the vampire novel. A lot of people are saying it, and this book definitely proves that point. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I understand why people like this so much. However, this isn't the first vampire read I do. I actually wrote essays about vampire stories when I was in college. So I definitely read a lot of the lore and explored a lot of vampirism and books and media before this was ever published. And this leans very heavily on other vampire stories we've had before. So it's nothing new, but as far as an enjoyable vampire story, this is incredibly good. We follow this book from the perspective of one of the brides of Dracula. And that's, again, something that has been done before, but I think this is the first one that sort of does it successfully. There are a lot of trigger warnings at the start of this book, though, because it is darker and gloomier and gorier than, for instance, something like Silver Nitrate is. It definitely has that element, but I feel that if you've read other vampire stories before, this doesn't really, like, it doesn't add anything. It just kind of copy pastes really old concepts and sort of puts them into a new perspective. That's all the book does. And the one thing that I didn't enjoy about this book, that I didn't hear anybody talking about, this book is only 292 pages. It's incredibly short. But it's not only incredibly short, this is what the chapters sometimes look like. So this is one page of text, which is really big font size, by the way. And then it's followed by another empty page. I'm like, no wonder I was able to read this in like a single sitting almost, because not only is it fast paced, because we get all these blank pages, this is not a 292 page book. It's closer to 200, maybe even 150. So with this one of the reasons why I didn't give it 5 stars is because here again, I felt there were a lot of interesting plot points that the book touched upon, but it never went deep enough. It never explored certain things of vampire lore, they're just alluded to. And part of that is the role of our main character who narrates the entire story within the sort of circle of the brides and her relationship with Dracula. That's definitely reasons why we don't get a lot. But there would have been so many more opportunities to make this a much more exciting read if she found out more about being a vampire and what it means and what Dracula learns, because he's a scientist in this book. He tries to explore what a vampire is, what makes it different from a human being. So as far as a study in like immortality and like the impact of being immortal can have on a being, this was super interesting, but it never dug deep enough. We never get to know what's in Dracula's notes, but we mainly just get these 3 people banding together and eventually grouping together and building a new life for themselves. So with this book, again, I can see why people like it so much, but I just wanted a little bit more, especially because this feels like a draft to me. The way it is written, it feels like it could have been a draft. It could have been like 100, maybe 200 pages longer and explore more of the themes that it sets up, but it doesn't fully go into detail. So that's why I only give this 4 stars. Very enjoyable. I love a good vampire novel for sure. I'm biased that way. I know that for sure. But A Dowry of Blood left me wanting more. But those weren't the only 3 books that I read, of course, because I did also read some things on my e-reader. Let's do that first. So first up, I read a Dutch book. This is Anya Niewierra. I don't know whether that's how you pronounce it. And it's called De Camino. And this book won loads of prizes last year when it was first released. And it was on Kobo Plus, so I was like, might as well read it. And I tandem read this together with my mom, who got it from the library, and we sort of read it together, and then we were able to discuss it together. And this was, again, enjoyable. I gave it 3 stars. This is about a lady who sets on a pilgrimage to find out what happened to her husband, because he took the same route on the Camino, the pilgrimage towards Spain, but I think he was doing like a section in France, so it takes place mostly in France. And she sort of follows in his footsteps because he died there. And she's trying to figure out what happened to him as sort of part of her grieving process. And so she embarks on the same journey. So we get the journey, but at the same time we get flashbacks to her husband's life, as well as flashbacks to her own life, meeting her husband, getting kids, and doing all that. So this book, in theory, has so much going for it. I definitely think there are a lot of enjoyable elements to it. The most interesting part to this book is the fact that one of the subplots is the effects of the war in Yugoslavia and like that area of the world. I don't want to misname this or anything like that, so I'm not entirely sure, but it was really good to sort of highlight that the effects there and like how that divided people and all that. That was the interesting part of the book. But the main character, this lady, she was dumb. I felt she was naive, she was dumb. she didn't put two and two together for such a long time. There ends up being this whole story behind her husband that she didn't know anything about, and also her husband's best friend who married her sister or her best friend or whatever. Like this, it's this whole circle of people that that her entire life revolves around, who don't seem to be who they are. And of course, these things can happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen at all, but I just felt like she was a little silly at times and very self-absorbed, which is why she was missing certain things. So for me, the main character felt incredibly flat, and the writing style in the book was so simplistic. And it just, again, very enjoyable, quick, easy, thriller-like read. Really enjoyable for that reason, but I just wanted a little bit more. And then the second book I read was only a 2-star read for me. This was a continuation of a book I read over the summertime. It was The Daughter of the Siren Queen, and this is the second book in the series. The first one is called The Daughter of the Pirate King, I believe. And this is about a girl, I've already forgotten her name, and she is part human, part siren. Her dad is the Pirate King, and she herself is a pirate. And in the first book, she is set to find a map on a ship of rivaling pirates. So she has herself be captured, and that's what that storyline is all about. We get to know her, we get to know her group of pirates, and I just thought that was such an enjoyable book. I read it in a single sitting as I was traveling home on my summer vacation. It wasn't super difficult. It just felt like a really enjoyable book. It was sort of like Pirates of the Caribbean, but then the feminine version, you could say. So it felt like a really super fun romp, and I was like, I want to continue this series. Apparently it started off as a duology, but there is now a third book in the series. The reason why I only give this 2 stars is because this book was exactly the same as the first book. There was zero character development, and where I still had people that I wanted to root for in this book, I didn't have that all here. There was a romance that felt incredibly forced. I don't know why. It just wasn't as enjoyable as the first one. There was less at stake here. The stakes that were there just didn't feel very real, because we knew, like, from the get-go that she would come out on top, like, she would do something. And it just felt a little bit forced. And this one, again, was pretty short. It was only like 250 pages or something. So I didn't really realize that going into it. And I think that's part of the reason why I didn't enjoy it as much. Very much like A Dowry of Blood, this touches upon super fun themes. It touches upon female friendship and love interests and will they, won't they, and like parent-daughter relationships. So it has so much potential of what this book could be, and then it just doesn't deliver. So that's why for me this was a 2-star. It was a little bit of a simplistic one. Enjoyable, yes, but I won't be reading the third one. And then I listened to some audiobooks. The first book I listened to was Suzanne O'Sullivan's The Sleeping Beauties. This is a nonfiction about like illnesses that cannot be explained by medical reasons, but there is like a cultural phenomenon going on within a group of people why the illness only affects those people. And she's a neuroscientist who's researched this and who's visited these communities. And I thought this was so interesting. And the first few chapters definitely were. But in the second half of the book, I was so, because she narrated it herself as well, I just felt she came across to me as a very condescending Western scientist who, just because she doesn't understand how things work, was dismissing everything that these families had told her, which is exactly what she says at the beginning of the book she's not gonna do, that she wants to understand these people, that she wants to, like, she really went to these communities and, like, spent time with people to interview them, and she does the exact opposite of what she was saying she was gonna do. So the first half of the book was really interesting, but this became very repetitive as well. The cases started to blur together at some point, and I couldn't really tell it apart from one thing to the next. So for me, This ended up being a 2-star read. I have this a lot with nonfiction. Most nonfiction books end up being just 2 stars because I always feel it just keeps going a little too far with the themes that are going on into the book, and then it becomes too repetitive and I'm like, yeah, I get the point, move on. But this didn't really happen for me with Cultish. This is by Amanda Montell, and this is called The Language of Fanaticism. So I thought this was going to be like a linguistic exploration of how language can shape groups of people, and it definitely touches upon that point, but this is mainly a personal exploration of what cults are and how they are organized, because her dad was apparently in a cult, so she has this personal connection, and then like all of these different cults are explored. That's what I really enjoyed, but I just felt this book didn't really deliver on its premise. I felt that if the linguistic element of it was explored more, I would have enjoyed it better, because a lot of these things I already know from documentaries and stuff, so it felt like rehashing a lot of things that are already there in popular culture, but the language aspect of it wasn't delved into enough. I think it was only like 1 chapter where it was really about the language of a cult and not the rest. So that's why I gave this 3 stars. I do enjoy a good cult documentary like true crime. I'm here for it, so that's why this has a bit of a notch up. I did really enjoy the pacing of this as well. That was really good. I'm not sure if she was the narrator as well. I don't think it was, but this was also really well narrated. So that definitely goes with audiobooks as well. How it is narrated definitely affects how I like it. And finally, the last book I read is Over Prickled Brein by Charlotte Labbe. And you can tell from my pronunciation that this is another Dutch book. And she is like a self-help guru here in the Netherlands. I cannot explain it any other way. She has a huge presence on Instagram and social media, and she writes books. And I did listen to one of her previous audiobooks, which I thought was just as dreadful, but I was just hoping to get something else from this, and I just didn't. So I kind of like shot myself in the foot, you could say, because I sort of already knew going into this that this would probably just be a sales pitch for the things that she sells. And that's exactly what this is. Every single chapter ends with, and if you want help with this, all you need is my course. Or if you want this, just buy my supplements. Very scary. I don't enjoy these kind of books where you're just marketed to continuously. All she does is send you to her website to read more. Every single time where it gets truly interesting, that's what she does. The only people she sort of quotes are people who've taken her courses, who say how effective it all is. So it's just one giant sales pitch, so I didn't enjoy it for that reason. The reason why this isn't 1 star, though, is because the information in the book is pretty solid. However, she is just summarizing what is already out there. Like, you can find this yourself. You don't need this book to know more about how your brain works. And there are far better books about how your brain works, both in English and in Dutch, I feel, that I know the existence of, that I have either read or that I've like skimmed, that are actually done by scientists, because she presents everything in a scientific way, but she's not a scientist herself. But she says, like, I have all this help from experts, and the experts that help her are usually like the outcasts of certain scientific groups because they fail to meet certain ethical standards. So for me, this was very convoluted. I still got little tidbits of information out of it that I did enjoy. That's why it's 2 stars. But I don't think I will be listening to any more of her audiobooks because she has like 5 of them or something crazy like that. And if you are Dutch and you were looking into her stuff, I would veer very, very much on the careful side with things, because for the most part, she's just trying to get your money. That's all it is. She's not an expert in these things. No. So for me, that's a really, really hard no. It's definitely not like a very scientific approach, even though she makes it seem to be, which is very dangerous, I think. And those were all the books I read. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. It is a very gloomy, rainy day to me today, so I hope the image quality is okay, because I am always filming with natural lighting, and in the fall and winter season, that's always a little bit more challenging, and I really had to film it now to get this video up on time. So I hope you don't mind, and then I hope to see you again very, very soon with a new video next week. See you then. Bye-bye.